It's been such a long saga getting to justice for lives that were taken in relatively short amounts of time. Lori Vallow Daybell, her brother Alex Cox, and her now husband Chad Daybell destroyed 4 lives in 2019. These 4 people were considered obstacles to the life of freedom, financial fortune, and frolicking on beaches that Lori and Chad were determined to achieve. The first victim, Lori's 4th husband, Charles Vallow, was unalived in a period of 2 minutes on July 11th of 2019. All it took to cross the line from life to death. Next, Lori's 2 youngest children disappeared one after the other. 16-year-old Tylee Ryan was last seen on September 8th of 2019 during a family outing to Yellowstone National Park. Some people believe that trip may have been a failed attempt at unaliving Tylee, JJ, or both. Why not push them in a hot spring where the water reaches up to 199 degrees Fahrenheit or 93 degrees Celsius? But maybe Lori and Alex were afraid of being caught in the act. Perhaps the park was busy that day, and maybe they noticed the many webcams in the park. Who knows? 15 days after Tylee was last seen, on September 23rd of 2019, 7-year-old JJ Vallow was seen for the last time. JJ and Tylee's remains wouldn't be found until June of the following year on Chad Daybell's property in Idaho, a little under a month after JJ vanished. From what we know, only one person survived an attempt on their life by Alex Cox, and that was Melani Boudreaux. Brandon was married to Lori and Alex's niece, Melani. Melani's mother was Lori and Alex's older sister, Stacy Lynn Cox Cope, who died mysteriously in 1998 at the age of 31. Stacy allegedly had an eating disorder and diabetes. According to some people, Stacy and Lori's mother, Janice, who was known to chew and spit out her food at the dinner table to taste it but not get the calories, likely affected her daughter's perception of their bodies. Clearly, the Cox children did not grow up in a psychologically sound family environment. That's my opinion. It is believed that Alex Cox concealed himself in Tylee's gray Jeep and waited for Melani Boudreaux to return home from a school run and a gym session. As Brandon pulled into his driveway, a projectile pierced the window of the car, narrowly missing his head. Brandon literally cheated death that day. It was a miracle. Now, because Alex Cox died, only Lori was charged with attempted blank for the incident, and her trial for that alleged crime will take place in early June in Phoenix, Arizona. Lori is facing a charge of conspiracy to commit first-degree you-know-what. The maximum sentence for this is life imprisonment, and eligibility for parole arises only after serving a minimum of 25 years. Lori is currently 51, so she'll be 76 if she spends those 25 years in prison. But she's not getting out because of her other 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, and she's likely going to get another life sentence for Charles Vallow's death, which she was recently convicted of. You could say that Lori will likely end up with the same number of life sentences as the number of husbands she's had. 5. Her current hubby, Chad Daybell, is in prison in Idaho, and he's facing the ultimate punishment. Alex Cox died in 2019, a very bad year for people near Lori Vallow, from a pulmonary embolism, although many people, including Lori's older brother Adam Cox and JJ Vallow's grandmother, Kay Woodcock, believe Alex was likely poisoned by Lori and Chad, perhaps by his new wife, Zulema Pastenes, serving up the brew. Maybe this is pure speculation, But Alex did tell Zulema that he feared he was going to be the fall guy for Lori and Chad. In addition, he died a day after Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell's body was exhumed. The police were going to look at Tammy's death in greater detail to see if she was unalived, and they determined that she was. Maybe Lori promised Zulema some money to do that to Alex. Maybe she promised her a greater role in their new church. Lori Vallow Daybell's trial for the attempt on Brandon Boudreaux's life will be her last foray into the public eye unless reporters offer her interviews. That trial should be very interesting because it will mark Lori's last chance at selling her made-up version of events. The one where she's innocent of all wrongdoing, and her deceased daughter, Tylee, is the villain. Many people believe that Brandon Boudreaux's ex-wife, Melani, had to have had a hand in the attempt on his life. Brandon, like Charles, had life insurance, and it was to the tune of $2 million. I don't think it's any coincidence that Brandon was targeted, and I personally believe Melani had to have known and probably gave her Aunt Lori and her Uncle Alex the okay to do this to Brandon, as well as details about where he would be and when he would be there on the day the projectile pierced his vehicle's window. At the urging of her Aunt Lori, Melani divorced Brandon and then quickly moved on to marry Ian Pawlowski in Las Vegas, Nevada in November of 2019. Again, 2019 was a very busy year. Melani and Ian married just 10 days after they met. In preparation for Brandon Boudreaux's upcoming trial in June, a trial I plan to attend, I thought I'd share notes that Ian Pawlowski wrote, telling the police about what Melani told him regarding Lori and Chad, and what he, Ian, thought about Melani's potential involvement in and knowledge of the crimes that Lori and Chad carried out. The notes offer a fascinating look into Ian Pawlowski's mind and his beliefs about the horrific crimes that took place in 2019. And in my opinion, Ian has helped keep Melani from being charged in connection with the attempt on Brandon Boudreaux's life and perhaps the other crimes. She should thank her lucky stars for Ian going to law enforcement and agreeing to secretly record Melani's phone calls with Lori and Chad. Let's now listen as I read the notes that Ian Pawlowski wrote. Open quotes, and this is Ian Pawlowski writing to law enforcement. When Melani began sharing all of these things with me, I tried to keep an open mind. I'd only met her 4 days previous, but felt very comfortable around her. I believe there is more to the gospel than what I have seen so far, but I never thought it would sound like this. The ideas seemed harmless at first, and she sounded pretty certain of some of them. She talked about how she'd learned some of these things in the temple and others from Chad and Lori. Upon first meeting Chad and Lori, I didn't get a bad impression of them, but they did seem different. I didn't think anything of that, as I feel like that's a fairly normal feeling to experience. I didn't give them much thought, as they said they were planning on taking off and that I'd be taking the reins concerning care of Melani. They said they'd be going to Hawaii and invited me to come and visit sometime later. Later, Melani explained porting and that they could travel there by that method. The first time hearing all of these new beliefs was a jolt. I was looking for someone spiritual, but this was a leap beyond that into concerning territory. I had fears and doubts, but I trusted Melani and wanted to give it a fair chance. So I continued to listen and ask questions in hopes it would click for me. It never did. There were fun and exciting ideas, but it felt like many of them were ripped straight out of a Dungeons and Dragons manual. Between the stats, accounts of dark and light weapons, and words spoken in blessings, it sounded like someone had created a tabletop RPG based on the Bible. While living something like that appealed to me, I couldn't find anything to confirm it as I prayed and asked. I figured anyone called to something like this would struggle, but how else would they be made aware of things like this? I continued to try and keep an open mind and proceed with caution. Melani began to share that she feared for the lives of 2 of her children based on a dream she'd had where they came to her. This brought her tidings of great joy. Her daughter thanked her for allowing her the freedom to use her agency until the end. This concerned me and made my heart ache for her. I felt there was no way anything could have happened without people finding out. We married faster than any sane couple would, but we both felt it was right. On our wedding night, she began to elaborate on the ideas she shared earlier about her children coming to her. She explained zombies and her fears about what Chad and Lori stated concerning the original spirits being caught in limbo until the body's death. She stated that Brandon had been possessed by a demon or another dark entity sometime after June of this year. She was told either through revelation or by Chad that something would happen to him, that something needed to happen to him in order for his spirit to progress and for the Lord's plan to continue. She didn't take well to the idea of her husband dying as part of the Lord's plan, but didn't think action would be taken by anyone. She still loves Brandon and would never wish ill on him. It just sounded to her like it would be something that happened on its own when it was his time. This is where things started becoming concerning to me. She shared the idea that Chad and Lori could have directed Al to take a shot at Brandon. It wasn't anything she was sure about. The concern began when she was called into the Gilbert PD and asked about Chad, Lori, and Alex after the attempt on Brandon's life. She later was given the impression that the projectile needed to move 5 inches so as not to hit Brandon. Initially, to me, it sounded like this was told to her by Chad. The discussion moved to Chad and Lori's missing children. At the time, only JJ was counted as missing, and the Rexburg PD had conducted raids on Melani's apartment, along with Al's. Melani had been told by Chad and Lori that their children had been possessed and had become zombies. She shared concerns that she's been told Brandon needed to die, and that may indicate that Tylee and JJ needed to die as well. She told me she was worried that Al may have had to take care of the kids. She explained that Al had great faith and never wavered in his trust in the Lord. No task would be too difficult or great for him. When I asked for clarification, she restated her concern verbatim. At that point, I became severely worried, but told myself there's no way I just married into a situation so sinister. I spent the next 2 days trying to justify my actions and reassure myself that everything was fine, but I couldn't get to that point. My ex-wife, Natalie, had been asking for Melani's name so she can check her out on social media and get an idea of who she is. Melani had been adamant that I not share her full name with anyone for fear that Brandon may locate and harass her. I couldn't justify that and eventually gave Natalie Melani's full name. On Tuesday, December 2nd, I got a call from my mother. She'd just gotten off the phone with Natalie. When we divorced, Natalie made a point to cut herself off from my entire family and hadn't spoken to any of them for at least 8 months. She had made as little contact with me as possible. but hadn't been unkind since the initial conflict of the divorce. My mother told me she just received a video call from Natalie. Natalie was terrified. She managed to reach Brandon through his business and heard his side of things. She'd been told Melani was in a cult and that she had tried to have him killed. While I didn't and still don't believe she had anything to do with his attempted red rum, I was still terrified at the possibility. The next morning on the way to work, Natalie called and we were discussing how to handle this in order to keep our kids safe. She told me she'd be going in to meet with the police. I told her I'd go along and lay out everything I understand. I saw two possibilities. The first was that Melani isn't who I thought she was, and I keep myself and my family out of a dangerous situation. The second was that Melani has been taken advantage of, and I'm going to get her out of a messy situation and get healed. When meeting with the police, I intended to share things as I understood. Detectives Hope and Hermosillo were present along with an FBI agent named Ricky. I've since shared all of my concerns with Melani and have gotten clarification on some of them. What I shared with the police were the ideas that Chad, Lori, and Alex may have planned shooting at Brandon, and that Tylee and JJ may be in serious danger. If Melani's fears have any validity, if shooting at Brandon was indeed based on the idea that he was no longer actually Brandon and needed to die as part of the Lord's plan, then the kids' lives could be forfeit based on the idea that they're not really Tylee and JJ anymore. I shared that Melani had concerns about them participating in the shooting and was against anyone trying to hurt him. She couldn't see them doing these things, but she also knew they would follow the Lord's will as they saw it. I shared ideas about earthquakes being prepared in SLC, and that it was believed that there would be a time when the quakes hit that many possessions would occur there due to the high number of injured there would be. Such a thing would be a huge threat to God's plan and would need to be dealt with directly. Al and Zulema had stayed in Las Vegas and were preparing earthquakes at the time I spoke with the police. I shared concerns for the safety of my kids and Natalie. I offered to help in any way I can. I then allowed them to pull data from my phone. I met with them again the following afternoon and restated what I knew for a few other detectives, Lieutenant Ball and another FBI agent named Travis. They shared some mild concern about me potentially spying for Chad and Lori. I explained that I was there because I was concerned primarily for the safety of my kids and that I wanted to get Melani out of this if possible. They gave me a recording device that looked like a thumb drive on a keychain. My plan was to record anything I could to help locate Tylee and JJ, locate Chad and Lori, and understand what happened when Brandon was shot at. If I thought Chad and Lori were going to be calling, I'd turn on the recorder and just let it run until they'd hung up. I don't feel that anything substantial was recorded, as Chad and Lori never talked about the kids or their location. Most of the conversations consisted of everyone commiserating about the current circumstances, discussing religious ideas, and just catching up. In addition to the recordings, I would talk with Ricky, and he'd let me know about things that may come up in conversation. He was never specific, but would give me enough info for me to know when it came up. These tips turned into Tammy's body being exhumed and Al's passing. On 12/19, Detective Hermosillo contacted me and told me they had another warrant for Al's apartment next door. He asked if I'd give them the code to the garage so they would have to break in the door. I shared the code. I didn't see any reason not to. They went in with a forensics team and looked for any evidence of JJ having been there. Melani saw them there and spent the afternoon at my apartment. That night, I went to the apartment and looked around to see what they had been doing or if they'd taken anything. I also wanted to see the warrants to understand what they'd been looking for. After looking around, I went to see Melani at my apartment. I finally broke down and told her that I'd spoken with the police and that I don't believe any of this. I didn't know how she would react, but I couldn't hang on to the stress anymore. Of course, she was hurt, feeling betrayed, but she reassured me that she loves me and that she understands why I did it. At that time, I didn't share that I'd been recording anything. I wasn't sure if we'd hear from Chad and Lori again. Over the following week, we had discussions on our situations, and I came to understand things a little better. She was legitimately afraid of the ideas I'd shared with the police and FBI, but they weren't anything she had any proof of. As I've spoken with her and dug into the details, I've come to believe that she truly doesn't know anything about who shot at Brandon or where the kids have gone. She only has what-if scenarios that she's shared. I'm worried that I jumped the gun and have sent the authorities on yet another wild goose chase, along with prompting them to light up the national media with pieces of what I've shared. My intent was to protect my family and help solve the case of the kids' disappearance, not smear anyone in the public eye. I certainly don't want to give Brandon any ammo to hurt Melani any more than he already has. I still have my doubts. Primarily, why not turn to the police first instead of disappearing if you claim your life is in danger? Why leave your innocent niece here to clean up the mess and encourage her not to cooperate with the authorities? Why encourage her not to fight for her kids? Why encourage her not to fight for her kids? Her ex-husband now has temporary sole custody as a result. Why not simply provide proof that the kids are okay and put an end to this insanity? Isn't it odd that the two detectives assigned to your case happen to be two of the Kane's Dark 50? Everyone trying to do the job and save these kids are either evil or deceived. Your kids are missing, and it doesn't come up once during a handful of lengthy conversations. There are so many more that I have. I don't ever want to have anything to do with those two after this. Melani has been through the ringer because of their paranoia and now is in the hot seat because I went to the police and tried to help. I know she's done nothing wrong, and I want her free from this. I will no longer openly cooperate with the police or the FBI, but I will through a lawyer. My final straw was when I received a call on Friday from Ricky where he threatened charges of lying to a federal officer and or being an accessory in the disappearance of Tylee and JJ because Melani couldn't clearly answer questions about the religious aspects of the investigation. After I shared my doubts with her, her world shattered. She couldn't answer those questions because she doesn't know what she believes about those things anymore. There was so much information dumped on her by Chad and Lori that she can't remember what she learned from them, from the podcasts she listened to, or on her own. A 20-year veteran FBI agent throwing a hissy fit after one shaky interview tells me all I need to know about how they want to handle this. She didn't trust authorities because of how poorly the AF treated her when she went to pick up her kids with a court order in hand. Okay, so that's it from Ian. Ian believes Melani, they're still married. The question is, do we believe Melani? Do the police believe Melani? Because they haven't charged her with anything. I think the trial of Brandon Boudreaux may be one of the most, how shall I put it, full of fireworks, because I think Lori's going to bring out everything. This is her last chance This is her last time on the stage. She wants to get her story out. So I think people are underestimating how interesting this trial is going to be. I will see you next time on Bed Crime Stories. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to help me make it to CrimeCon this year, please consider a donation because it is quite pricey. And without the donations, I don't think I'm going to be able to go. And in order to grow this channel, I pretty much need to go. See you next time.